everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Janine Wolf, and today I'm joined by my friend, Jordan Pointer. Jordan has been a licensed professional counselor in the state of Virginia since 2013. Her background is in structural family therapy. She has experience in community mental health, outpatient, individual, group, and family counseling, providing counseling in a school setting, crisis counseling, emergency services, and supervisory experience. So basically, she's done it all. She's trained in EMDR and enjoys incorporating creative approaches in her sessions, such as through art, music, and movement. And I have to throw out that she is a very talented artist outside of therapy as well. So today we're going to talk about controversial topics among therapists. I'm so excited. Welcome, Jordan.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for having me, Janine. And hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to listen to some controversy today.
Yeah. So one of the things that very often get discussed in the consultation groups is some of these themes around controversial topics, people that come out hard and fast about one particular idea. And if that's the way they do it, so everyone else should do it, or this is right and that is wrong. And the people that are really very restrictive in how they practice because they were taught the ideal in grad school, even though we know that our work is not the ideal we were taught in grad school. We need some flexibility and things like that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right. So these are some topics that came to us from colleagues, from therapists who are in training, just conversations that happen in our field that will get discussed in the Facebook groups, typically in a really aggressive, non-supportive way. So we are having a different conversation today.
Yes. And just to touch on that, like that, I think is something the narrative has changed so much. I would say probably since COVID, when so many people were going online. And, I know we all talk about how so many things have changed with the therapy landscape since COVID, that these topics, they come up with people, specifically Facebook group. And I don't know, I think when I think back on my own experience before, that's how I met you, Janine, was through COVID and starting my virtual practice. These topics, I didn't really have anyone that I would talk about because I was just kind of isolated in my immediate community, the counselors I knew at my group practice. There were no like online forums where I was kind of getting a beat for like the bigger picture of just how therapists in general were thinking about some of these things. So it's been interesting and exciting to just see, ooh, that's a hot topic button or a button pusher,
Yeah. And so word to the wise, therapist Facebook groups can be really amazing for connecting with other therapists, hearing some opinions and things like that. But you do have to remember that firstly, so many people post anonymously now. Sometimes it's out of fear of being attacked. And I'm not sure why. I think that we need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and say, hey, I'm asking this question, and expect that our peers will be respectful. But it also doesn't always happen. So you need to be careful about being vulnerable in those groups. That's not the place to be vulnerable. Your peer consultation group is the place to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think from the safety behind your keyboard, people can say some really, really intense things. But maybe a first topic to dive into. And again, this is one I've heard talked about amongst colleagues. I've even had clients raise questions about it, is how long a client is engaged in therapy with their counselor. I see lots of differing opinions on this. I know I personally have had several clients that I've been working with for years, and I don't know, it seems some people, again, that can be controversial of, like that is a sign something is wrong, or have you made your client too dependent on you? Or, clearly your treatment isn't working if they've been with you that long. So and then what is that? I know, obviously, I guess the other side of the spectrum would be more like solution-focused brief therapy, which might be just like a few sessions. So this is a topic that I've seen people get pretty heated over. So my thoughts on it are considering the client, their needs, their diagnosis. I work with people that usually have more trauma, attachment concerns. So in my perspective, I think it can be appropriate that they are with their therapist for a longer chunk of time if their goals are still being addressed. And one thing we know about attachment trauma, especially, is a lot of the work is in the relationship. So part of that healing may be them establishing a longer relationship with a trusted person and seeing how that's literally causing shifts in their nervous system to feel that safety and stability. So it's not summed up in, 10 sessions with a nice bow, you're done.
Yeah. And I think that what gets lost at times is that what we're taught in graduate school is the ideal way to do everything. But once you get out into private practice, you find that, okay, in a perfect world, this is the way I would do this. But I have a human in front of me with specific needs, and I'm going to choose the modality that's going to work best for them and meet their needs. And some of those modalities do require longer term relationships. I find that when I work with seniors as well, there's a lot of revisiting about earlier life events and, loss of independence and changes in their body and all that kind of stuff. And so that's not just like, okay, we're going to meet for 6 sessions and then you're going to be all good to go, because it's a continual decline for them. So keeping in mind that we need to trust our colleagues' training and experience, that they're making the right choice for their client, and maybe instead just ask questions. So I'm curious. I don't typically see clients for that long a period of time. Can you tell me about the population you work with or the modality you use? So I'd like to understand instead of just saying you're wrong.
Absolutely. And also to say that I also realize it's not for everybody. Some counselors prefer to have limited amount of sessions with a client, and they may be even upfront about that at the beginning. I tend to see clients for 20, 25 sessions. After that, we'll reevaluate your goals and either refer you out or take a break. And, I have respect for clinicians that work that way as well. But again, I think it comes back to that doesn't necessarily mean someone in therapy long term, but that is immediate red flag. I was talking about this with a colleague as well. Just the parameters of like CSB, community mental health. A lot of times they have definite rules. You have 10 sessions with this client, or if they're coming to you for EAP work, then you might have parameters in place that you do have to follow. That's a whole other can of worms, but I think that's more like an outside influence is why you might have limited time with a client.
Yeah, for sure. And even with EAPs, when I worked with a lot of EAPs in the past, typically when their 10 sessions were over, there was still work to be done. And so I would give them the option, like, if you want to continue working with me, I do accept your insurance. This is fine. I can refer you to someone else if you want to continue with therapy work, or if you feel like, you're good to go, that's fine too. But recognizing that even with external limitations, there are sometimes ways to recognize that the work's not done yet. Just because somebody prescribed a number of sessions doesn't mean that we're going to be able to accomplish that. It also has to do with how motivated the client is to change, their readiness personally, emotionally, mentally, to really jump in there and do the hard work. It's so interesting because I was reading a post about, it was actually a Reddit therapist post about this therapist who was horrified that she's been working with a client for a couple years. The client ended up inpatient, and she disclosed childhood trauma. And this therapist was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible therapist. How could I work with them for years? And I didn't know this." And everyone chimed in, and a lot of them worked with veterans, and they were just like, they're not going to tell you until they're ready. And that has nothing to do with you. You can show up, you can establish the relationship, build the rapport, but until it feels right for them, you're not doing anything wrong. But that does feel bad, the therapist, because I've had that happen too. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Oh, yeah.
what did I miss here?
Yeah, so me too, especially again, working with people with trauma. Or it might be that there's like a big trauma to them. And then, we're working together for a long time. And then much later, oh yeah, this thing happened to me. And it's like, whoa, wow, like that is irrelevant. But, like, did you feel safe? Did you feel that trust to disclose that? That's a very good point. And sometimes it's like, the amount of time that they maybe needed to I had a colleague that would use the analogy, put coins in the bank. that, and then at one point you cash in your coins about, I'm now going to take that leap of faith to trust you to disclose this. So, that sometimes that is what can take a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we bury trauma so deep that sometimes it's a matter of them coming to an awareness of what happened to them. I've seen that over and over with the brain spotting, that we start brain spotting a particular thing, and then their brain shifts them to this experience they had as a child that shocked them. And they're just like, wow, like tears are flooding their face. And they're like, I don't remember this at all. But and so I'm of a generation that I can't remember what they were called, like planted memories or whatever, was a big controversial thing in our field, where therapists were sort of guiding people. Well, did this happen? Maybe you were sexually abused by your father and you don't remember it. So what I love about brain spotting is I'm not really speaking much at all. So I'm not planting any of those memories. They are just purely coming up on their own, which is amazing. But I think it's been helpful for me to kind of reframe that it's not always about trust. Sometimes it's about readiness to remember that happened, readiness for your body and your brain to say like, okay, I'm ready to tackle this now. So I'm going to let you remember.
Absolutely. And I guess to continue this conversation, but to maybe add in another controversial topic, which we're kind of already getting into, is like different modalities. And which ones are good and aren't. And again, let the debates ensue.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you talk about brain spotting. I'm trained in EMDR, which I will geek out about EMDR to anyone for hours. I personally love it. We're hearing things IFS and parts work. I think ART.
Yeah.
That's one that's a lot of people are talking about. And obviously, I believe all of these are specifically more geared towards trauma processing in some cases, but certainly can be used with other modalities. But I've seen a lot of controversy about, number one, just which topics or modalities seem legitimate, and then also who's allowed to do what. Have you had the appropriate training, and what does that qualify you to do? Can you even speak on this topic at all? So I don't know. That's something I've seen people get pretty fired up about. I'm specifically thinking of IFS parts work, which I personally love. I think it's super interesting. I think this is changing, but as I understand, the training is, number one, very hard to get into. I think there's like a lottery system. It's pretty expensive. So I think in the field, we overall have fewer legit trained level 1, 2, 3 IFS therapists, but yet should that exclude therapists who at least feel knowledgeable and comfortable with some of the concepts using that with their clients? And I attended a webinar last week actually with Dr. Frank Anderson, who is one of the big gurus with IFS. He was really awesome. I loved what he had to say, but he actually spoke to this, which I really appreciated, that, learning about IFS, you certainly can use these concepts with your clients, and encouraged us to start exploring some of the things he was teaching to use with a client. But he did caution if things are getting really complex. I think the term specifically, you're trying to unburden an exile, then you might want to refer out. So, but again, I've seen people say you should not even be talking about parts work to your clients if you are not level 1, 2, 3 trained. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that brings up so many different thoughts for me. First of all, I feel like we have had more and more manufactured certifications that sometimes I'm like, so who really said that your certification should be checking all the boxes? There are all kinds, and I'm not talking about EMDR or IFS, because I think those are well established in the way they train and that type of thing. But some of these other trainings that you do that, you will be certified at the end of this training. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Is that you saying I'm going to be certified allows you to charge me a whole lot more money. And so then we have this gatekeeping going on. And my concern about ART is that I was going to do that training. I decided to do brain spotting instead, that you have to sign an NDA when you do the training.
Really?
ART. Yeah, they're very.
That's about like some controversial topic.
Yeah, and so ART is highly effective. I have a colleague that does that along with brain spotting, and she shifts between the two of them when working with clients, and it's highly effective. But when you start doing this gatekeeping and, some of these trainings that, yeah, you can't be certified till you go through 5 levels, and each level is $2,000, and you can only, like you said, get in it if you're in a lottery. And so, like, who are we serving here? And I'm all about therapists making money outside of therapy work. If you have a skill set, a knowledge base, you put together a product, a program, whatever that you are putting out in the world and you want to charge a fee for that, I think that's fine. But when it gets into these high volume, really expensive programs, yeah, it's tricky. It gets tricky. And who gets to make that decision? Like, I saw a conversation about someone saying, I specialize in something. Well, how do you specialize in that? What training do you have? So it's like we even have to be really careful about the words we use. So I can say I work well with women who are ADHD, or that's a population I have a lot of experience with, but I shy away from the word specialized because it is a hot button for a lot of people. And I don't think it's really defined in our field.
Yeah. I think the terminology I like to use specifically with IFS and parts work, because again, I am not level 1, 2, 3 trained in IFS, but I say I'm IFS informed. So that if a client is specifically looking to work with 100% that modality, they likely would be better served with someone who's been through the formal training. And that's why I've also, just specifically with parts work, is shifted towards using the term parts work, because that includes IFS, but then also ego states. And so I guess, and it's all semantics, I guess. It's like, oh, is that a little safer to say I enjoy incorporating parts work versus saying IFS?
Yeah, I use that terminology as well for that very reason.
Yeah. Yeah. To, again, just avoid the controversy.
Yeah. And really, what we know about marketing as therapists is that those words and certifications and the way we talk about ourselves and our skill set and our work, the clients are less interested in that unless they specifically have learned about IFS. Someone's like, that would be perfect for you. They're going to seek out someone who's IFS trained. But most of the time, they want to know that you understand their problem and you can help them. So, like when you're writing your website, you write like, your experience in X, Y, and Z. And, these might be the underlying causes. And this is how I can help you. And, I can say I'm brain spotting trained, but that probably is at the bottom of the list because that's,
Yeah.
it's like Steve.
The client doesn't know what that means. The same with, so I'm trained in EMDR and I'm working towards my certification right now. That's another area of controversy, is what's the point of getting certified in EMDR when you can still do EMDR when you're trained? Because it is true, insurance does not pay more if you're certified or trained, and to the everyday person, they might not care. And just personally, my decision to do it is, like I said earlier, I love EMDR, and I found I was just constantly wanting to reach out to other colleagues to staff this case, or, oh, this question's come up for me, or, oh, I just read this book. And then I started scheduling some consultations with the EMDR consultants. So I found I was doing what you had to do anyway to become certified. So I was like, well, I might as well just do this for my own personal gratification. So, but I do understand the controversy, people saying, all that money to get certified, like, why? For me, it has been personally very rewarding. But again, another topic of, why must you do this?
Yeah. And I know for me, and I'm really clear about this in my podcast episodes and my emails and my trainings, is that I want you to figure out what works best with you and your client and your treatment style. And it can be vastly different for me, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just like the policies that we have. We can have very different policies around late cancellations, no-show fees. I honestly don't care what someone else's policy is if it works for them. and they're actually able to uphold it, then that's good. But if we're doing something that we feel uncomfortable about every single time we do it, then I'm like, you need to check in with your values on this one, because if it was meeting your values, then you wouldn't be struggling with this all the time. I think having the respect to tell our colleagues, like, I'm so glad that works for you, and not trying to compare, because those of us who are in solo private practice, that's one of the big things about it anyway. You want to do the work in a way that works for you, a way that works for your clients, and be successful.
Yes. That just brings up, I guess this wasn't a topic I had thought of for today in discussing controversy, but that is a perfect one, is administrative differences in just
Yeah.
how you run your practice. Like you said, no show and late cancel fees. I know a personal routine I use that another peer consultation group I'm in, they all are like, I can't believe you do this. I do very like loose scheduling. I schedule my clients as we go. They use the portal to just schedule when they want or remember. Whereas I know other people are very rigid. Like, you are now my Tuesday at 4 o'clock client. For me personally, that just doesn't work for me. But I've heard people say, how do you know when you're full? How do you know what your caseload is? And I get those perspectives, but again, and I have seen this topic come up in Facebook groups as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do you schedule that way? What are you doing? And it's definitely just a personal preference and aligning with what people's values are.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think we each are drawn to what works best with us. With my ADHD, it's so much more helpful for me to have like that clients on set days, and then I know when I need to work and when I need to be there. But I can also see other people with different types of brains that free flowing thing aligns better with them. And we tend to attract clients that connect with us. And that is certainly one of the types of connections that people can benefit from. So you might have a client who tells their friend, like, oh my gosh, I love working with Jordan because we sort of just figured out as we go along. I'm scheduled this week, but if I don't want to go next week, schedule the week out. She's not going to give me a hard time. Like, it's really customized to my needs. And because I work with a lot of women with ADHD, if they don't know they're going to see me every Tuesday at 1, there's a good chance they're not going to show up because they're not going to remember if it's a different time each week.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and totally. I get that as well. But yeah, just as we were talking about that, I was like, oh yeah, just administrative differences and how you flow. I don't know. So another topic I know we've been touching on earlier was like social media. Obviously, we've been talking about the Facebook groups, but this topic is more specifically just social media talking more about mental health diagnoses, a lot of like buzzwords I know that are out there right now that, again, seeing controversy about gaslighting, narcissists, everyone has autism, like all these things that, again, people get really fired up about. And again, I think this is something that maybe is just more out there probably since COVID, with just more things about mental health being online. What are your thoughts on that? I'll see mine in a bit.
Yeah. So, those things do tend to get co-opted from our work more now than they used to. Like, I rarely had a client that would come in and say I had a panic attack. That we would discuss a situation that happened, and I might say, like, okay, let me provide some psychoeducation here. This is called a panic attack, and this is the way we're going to work with this. But I see like stressed out, like 20s and 30s somethings. Anytime they're stressed out, it's a panic attack. Or I'll hear the phrase, oh, I'm so bipolar today. And and trigger became a big word for a while. Everything triggered somebody. And so social media is putting a lot of that out there. And I think that can be good. But I also feel like we need to educate our clients about who is the person you're getting this information from. Are they a professional? Is this someone from their own experience? Is this someone who just wants to have a public forum, so they're going to say whatever they want to say? Like, teaching our clients to, yeah, social media can be great, but let's be critical thinkers about like what we're consuming and the legitimacy of it.
Absolutely. I think that I share, your thoughts on, I think it's good and bad. Good in that I have had clients that have brought information to me from whatever sources they've seen, and we've been able to dive into it deeper, really explore things, or even maybe some symptoms that were kind of flying under the radar for me, for them, that they say, "Hey, I saw this described. This really resonates with me. Can we talk more about this?" That has then maybe led to them either having that diagnosed or seeking out a referral to an evaluation, especially for something like ADHD or autism. In that aspect, I think it's been really awesome to just increase access, because I think we have to consider how scary it might be for someone to be grappling with, is this something that's going on for me or not? And the only way I could get further information is to immediately go talk to my doctor or book a session with my counselor by looking up whatever Instagram feed is like, hey, top signs of this. That's so much more, I guess, comfortable to at least start the dialogue.
Curiosity, it's a great way to manage that curiosity that someone might be feeling.
Exactly. And in no way should it be a diagnostic tool, but I don't know. I think it is good that a lot of just more awareness of certain diagnoses are being brought forward. But yes, I've had that conversation with many clients specifically about bipolar. Like, well, let's talk about what that actually looks like.
Yeah.
Just because you got angry does not mean you are immediately bipolar. And then what was the other thing? Oh, I said earlier about just some of these terms. Am I in, a relationship with a narcissist? And, what defines that? Toxic relationships, gaslighting. I mean, I'm on the fence. I think that a lot of this is good, that it's bringing awareness, especially if people are in a relationship that might have some abusive characteristics. They literally might not know this stuff at all. A lot of times that's part of the dynamic, is not having awareness of, this is not okay. This isn't normal.
Yeah.
So to bring those terms with more access to at least get curious about them. But again, that doesn't mean everyone should then be labeled as a narcissist, or anytime there's a disagreement in your relationship, oh, you're gaslighting me. Like that extreme, I think, is what we want to stay away from. But definitely I've seen that be a hot button topic as well.
Oh, hugely hot button. Yeah. But I feel like it's creating more accessibility to mental health, because then people who are like, they're worried, I'm going to go in there and tell them that I think that I have this diagnosis or describe my symptoms, and they're going to completely like shame me over this. This is allowing them to gather data so they can come to the therapist and say, these are the things I've been noticing about myself. And it seems like these could be symptoms of a particular diagnosis. Can we discuss that? And them feeling a little empowered as they're coming in and doing that, instead of just really being afraid to show up. And because I know that with getting a diagnosis of ADHD or autism, we still have very old school practitioners out there that someone will come in for an evaluation and they'll be like, well, you have a master's degree, so you absolutely can't have ADHD, and shame them in some way. And it breaks my heart that they finally got the courage to go in and have an assessment and then be discarded or disregarded in that way, without even like, let's look at like the way we define ADHD and autism now. And you're just gonna like throw someone out the door because of some outdated idea. That I struggle with that so much.
Absolutely. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about the validity of self-diagnosis, specifically with neurodivergency. And I think that's a very important conversation as well, because again, a lot of the access issues for testing, and how outdated might it be, and especially for women, what might be missed. It's important. And I think, again, social media is maybe this is a hot take. Is social media kind of keeping up with the awareness of that maybe a little more than the hardcore researched mental health field?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's very interesting in there. I just lost my train of thought.
I've also thought of another that I would love to bring up, if this is okay for you, is, do you disclose your political views to your client? That would be majorly controversy, given what are
Yeah. Yeah, I did a training a couple of months ago about this, and the person was supposed to come on the podcast and we weren't able to make it work, which was a little disappointing, but people have lives. And the general consensus of the training seemed to be that still that idea of we have to be a blank slate and we have to figure out how to work with these clients and set aside our own personal needs. And it depends on the population we work with. It depends on our own nervous system and whether we can tolerate this conversation. I saw sort of in the consultation groups and for my own work, I saw sort of draw the line at if someone is attacking or speaking negatively about some aspect of your identity, it's okay to refer that person out because it's going to impact our whole caseload. It's going to impact us tremendously. And we just don't have to be assaulted in that way because sometimes it does feel like an assault.
Mm-hmm.
So since the recent presidential election, I'm seeing people all over the place. Because in our field, we tend to be a more left leaning field, but that's not across the board. It's not a requirement. It's not something that holds true for everybody. But there's a lot of people who were saying like, okay, so all my clients this week, we grieved together. And other people were like, how can you grieve together? They shouldn't even know your political beliefs. But it has to do with who you're working with and the type of therapy you provide. And it's like much more nuanced than none of your clients should know how you feel about this particular thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had clients that, like, again, in this past week specifically, I think my approach has been blank slate ish, given the client, given their concerns. But I definitely had several clients this week that they brought up their curiosity and caution about, can I talk about this with you today? Because I'm not for sure where you stand. And that's just, I guess, questioning my safety in
Yes.
talk about this with you. That right there is personally the kicker for me, that I will then disclose, I might not go on a huge rant, but say, just letting you know you are safe in whatever you might want to explore here. And then that sometimes even becoming a discussion. So I think that is the topic or the question that when I see those posts, like the client should have no idea about you, is flipping that. Imagine being in your client's shoes, especially if they're wanting to talk about something that might be a politically charged issue, and just wondering how is this person going to receive it? Yes, professionally, they should receive it without an ounce of reaction or judgment. That is our job. But you can't help but wonder, are there some sort of personal reactions or rejections coming from me talking about this? Is this truly safe? But yeah, obviously this controversial topic, this has been really popping off in this past week. And just, yeah, seeing how clients have brought it up in sessions, it's been interesting.
Yeah. And so the 2016 election, I was completely unprepared for as far as what was going to happen. I mean, I knew, like we all anticipated, it was a tough election. We knew it was a lot of hot button stuff there, about the candidates, the issues, all those things, which in the first time in my lifetime that had really happened before. Like we had the right and the left, and you maybe didn't like it. Person you didn't vote for didn't win. If the person you didn't vote for did win, and you might have your own feels about that, but our country as a whole wasn't so divisive around that kind of stuff. And so the day after the 2016 election, every single client came in presuming I shared their politics. And I did not vote for Trump. I was having my own feelings about his being elected. I was like, I kind of feel like I was numb or maybe even dissociated a little bit during the day because my whole body was just reacting to my personal stuff. And then, people would come in and be like, wait, did they presume that, they vote for Trump? I must vote for Trump. And so I really tried to stay neutral and all that. But I swore I would never work the day after an election ever again.
Yes. Yes. No, I remember thinking that in 2016. At that point is when I was working in emergency services, and I was like hospitalizing people that day. It like clients weren't even talking about it because, I was pretty acute people, but I was just not doing well. And I remember thinking, I need to take off the day after the election. And I totally forgot this year. But at the same time, it was, I don't know, I felt it was important to hold that space for where people were. So I didn't totally regret it. But I remember thinking, I forgot.
Well, I did take off the day after in 2020. I got pushback from some colleagues who were like, "You were abandoning your clients. It's your job to be there for them." And I was like, "Well, actually, my job is to teach them the resources they need to manage days like that." And and so I'm not their end all be all. And after this last election, I had a conversation around, I can't get you in. I understand you're devastated. So let me just give you some resources so that you can manage this on your own. And it worked beautifully. I did work on that Wednesday because I was supposed to be going out of town on Thursday. And so I had a light caseload, but it was, it was a hard day for me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that goes back into that whole question of checking yourself. Like, am I in a place to see clients today? And
Mm-hmm.
I could see that happening if you are not doing well, if you maybe felt pressure to work from your employer or whatever, and then maybe you kind of are easily activated by something a client says. Like that, I think is something to consider. That's probably not cool. Like, yes, those feelings may be valid, but to kind of, launch off on something because you're not okay, I think it would be better to take the day.
Right, absolutely. And just understanding that, to me, I learned this, I followed this rule that so many of us work when we're sick because we feel guilty about not being there for our clients. We also worry about the loss of income. And my rule of thumb for many years now has been, if I'm asking the question, if I'm okay to work, the answer automatically is no. Because if I'm asking the question, that means I'm probably not okay. And so I saw people in the day after the election saying, like, it emailed all my clients and canceled the whole day. And of course, there was a lot of pushback about that. But it's a matter of trusting that we are giving our clients what they need so that they can function without us. And that if you're asking that question, am I emotionally okay to work with clients today? No, you're not. You're not, and that's okay. We need to support each other in making those decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So before we wrap it up, let's talk about telehealth.
Another soapbox controversy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started doing telehealth in 2018. And then in 2019, I switched to fully online. And I actually took a marketing course because I was like, people in my field aren't going to like this. I'm going to get pushback. I need to learn a different way of marketing so I can find the clients who this will, be a benefit for them. And I saw huge success. Right before the pandemic, my husband and I were in Greece. I met this a psychologist from England who was like, I just don't think you can establish, a connection with someone through the internet. And I just, I really don't know if this is really the best way to be doing therapy. And I shared with her, I said, I've been doing this for a little bit now, over a year. I'd had some clients disclose trauma to me way sooner than I think they would have if we were face to face in an office, because they're in their safe space. They have their things around them. The distance of the screen can help as well. But I've also found through brain spotting, we talk about limbic countertransference. I've had situations where after a session, I've said to a client, like, hey, was there anything going on with your throat? Oh yeah, I was having trouble, I couldn't swallow very well. And I was feeling that in my throat. Or something about, well, how was your vision? They're like, I don't know. I just kept feeling like there was red around the edges. And I was seeing red around the edges as they were experiencing that. So I'm like, if that's through the computer, then I think we can make other connections. But there's still people who they did it during the pandemic, but they don't believe it.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think this topic, part of me wants to say yep, it's fine. We're good. All right, let's wrap it up. But, again, to revisit it, I do respect people who say this just isn't for me.
Yeah.
It's not like that is wrong. But what I do take issue with is when people are saying it does not work, it's not real, it's clients don't like it or benefit from it. That is just not the case. And also that might also depend on your clientele. I've seen people talk about like, perhaps older clients may not be comfortable with it, or older clinicians may not be comfortable with it, or that's something I definitely noticed in transitioning to telehealth, which again was just due to COVID for me. Like it definitely feels different for my system. I think I'm like maybe focusing harder during sessions because you're picking up on body language and tone of voice and those nuances. You kind of have to attend a little harder, I think, than you are in person. Because I noticed my bandwidth for sessions was higher in person. However, I work with a lot of young people, specifically college students. It's been so cool to continue those therapeutic relationships, or to see like teens that I've worked with in high school, to go to college with them, show me your dorm room, where are you today? I mean, that's just, in my opinion, that is probably the population that it's the most powerful for, because they're going through this huge transition. And so for you to still be that solid figure in helping them,
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Like, how do you argue with that?
When I shifted my whole practice to online, my clients, all except one person, came with me, and they were very anxious. So I was using Doxy, which is an online platform. You don't have to download anything. It's the same link every single time. And so I say, like, okay, pull out your phone. I'm going to text you a link. I text them the link, and they would click on it, and they're like, oh, I can see you. I'm like, that's how simple it is. And so with my seniors, I still use that Doxy link, because they're like, I can't do telehealth with any of my doctors, but I can do it with you, because I knew that that was going to be an accessibility issue for them. And so they only had to click this link, and they show up the same place. It's so easy. They don't have to do anything except click the link. And I feel like it's made it more accessible for seniors, because I've had clients that got into car accidents on the way to my office. Probably shouldn't be driving at that point, but they can still have sessions with me now. And, they're home alone a lot. It provides connection for them. It, had lots of benefits, but I think it can be accessible for different populations than we sometimes think about.
Absolutely. Another population that I've had, I think it's been very helpful for is mothers of young children.
Oh, yes.
And again, I don't think it's ever a situation where a child is unsafe, but like maybe they are, in the next room watching TV, or they've laid down for a nap, or a mom just like cannot find childcare. And we also have to consider, like, it's not just the hour session, it's the commute, it's packing up the car, whatever. I've seen moms just really benefit from telehealth, because it just makes it doable.
Yeah. And I'd much rather see them have their toddler sort of playing around in the room with them than the toddler that comes into my office and destroys everything. I'm so razzled by the end. I'm just like, and I would say, you can bring your child. There was parameters around that, like, a tablet and headphones. But, can you realistically have a session if you have this very busy child in the room that you're focusing on all the time? Maybe not. But in their own home, they can do that more. And just like, hey, I'm going to put the baby down for a nap and have my session. That's perfect. And people that work, so they don't have to worry about that commute. They go sit in their car in the parking lot, and they have the session during their lunch break.
Yes, I have a lot of those. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, bring your lunch. You can eat. It's all good. As long as you're able to, do what you need to do in session, I don't care if you eat, go for it.
Yes, yes. And then that brings us to what will hopefully be more people helped soon. I'm a counselor, so I'm looking at the counseling compact.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness, can it go any slower?
Social work is even slower than counseling.
Oh, I'm hopeful for these things, but population specifically there. I think of like traveling health professionals, like traveling nurses, traveling PTs, and truck drivers, people who are maybe like traveling out of state to stay with like a sick relative, or, obviously moving, or again, college students that go out of state to college. Just these populations that telehealth is what they would need for it to work. But on top of that, we are still waiting for this legislation to make that accessibility for when they are over state lines. So yeah, I don't know. I find it surprising that the telehealth topic is still controversial, but
Yeah, me too.
it is still there. I still see it. I've been totally online since I was online, and then I went back in person for a bit at my group practice, and then left for my individual practice that I've established. I'm all online. And it was so weird when I did go back in person. I was so out of my element. Like it felt
Yeah.
I was off my game to be
Do you remember we actually did a Facebook Live about that?
I do remember.
Like, you were like one of the first people I knew that went back in person, and you were telling me like how strange it was. I was like, we got to do a Facebook Live about this because for people who are considering it, they need to understand some of the nuances that they could hit.
Yeah, my brain has like jumped. Like I love screen sharing during my sessions. If I have a handout or a diagram to show a client, I'll be like, oh, hang on, let me screen share this. And so what I found is I would be in the office and I'd be like, oh, and it's like if I didn't have it with me, I need to get out my computer. It's like I wanted to quickly mentally just broadcast it onto the wall, and I can't do that, unfortunately. So I would really get I would like lose my flow. And then even EMDR, like I am obviously, again, I do all my EMDR virtually. I'm very comfortable with it. But when I was seeing people for EMDR in person, it just felt different for me. So anyway, who knows? One day I may be back with an office, but I really appreciate what virtual work has been able to offer for clients.
Yeah. All right. Well, we could discuss this for hours. There's so many nuances to the things we've discussed. Plus, there's a whole long list of other things that we didn't touch on today.
I've loved it. Controversy. Good topic.
Love discussing controversy. I like to also discuss it in a way that people can see like, I'm trying to open minds. I'm trying to allow you and I both. We're trying to allow people to see a different perspective and not be so stringent or strict on how they're perceiving things that are different than themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Jordan, do you have a favorite catchphrase or analogy you like to use with your client?
Oh, wow. I'm big on analogies. I use so many with clients. Some make fun of me because they're like, oh, here you go with another one. But they tend to be pretty spontaneous. So I don't know if I have an analogy per se. Quote I find myself using with people a lot, which I'm sure people have probably heard this before, specifically about boundaries. The people that have the biggest problem with you making boundaries are the people who benefit from you having none. So
yes,
that is one of my favorite quotes that comes up with a lot of clients, and just unpacking that, how that shows up in their life. So yeah, that's probably a frequent flyer for me.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think I always ask that question because I think most of us have those things that we fall back on, because it's like within the population we're working with, we're seeing the same thing over and over, and we come up with this great analogy or catchphrase, and people glom onto that, and we're like, yes, I'm gonna use that again.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Janine. Like I definitely I'll have to listen to what others have said.
Yeah,
that's my repertoire.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today. I always love hanging out with you. I will put the link to your website in the show notes. So if people want to connect with you either professionally or if there's a non-therapist listening who's in the state of Virginia and wants to work with you, they can find you there. And is there any last things you want to say before we wrap it up?
I suppose not. I appreciate being here today, Janine. Thank you so much for having me on. This was fun to talk about different topics.
Yep. Great. Okay. So for all you hardworking therapists out there, please remember our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.